Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the SMITE Comprehensive Guide to Sylvanus. Full disclosure, this is a slash map in which, a slash game in which the enemy team surrenders. I'm only uploading this because the enemy team has a Sylvanus and I wanted to compare and contrast here. Alright, now the first thing that I'm looking at on this team comp, besides noting the Sylvanus and picturing in my mind, okay, this is going to be a match I'm going to want to upload for the mirror match reason, I have to point out two things. First, Ixchel and Sylvanus provide a lot of healing to their team, as well as Thanatos and Fenrir being able to self-heal. So I already know sometime in the back half of the game I'm going to be looking to get a Toxic Blade, right? The second thing I want to point out is that they have a Fenrir instead of a regular warrior. So they're going to be hitting a little harder in the early game than you would normally expect. So I'm going to want to be building a little bit more protections to help my allies out. Now I grabbed the earrings here really quick just to give me a little bit more MP5. This is Slash, so there's going to be more people needing my attention. In Conquest, I wouldn't necessarily need the earrings with Sentinel's Gift and my plants, but with 5 people being potentially able to be sucked into a team fight, I'm going to need to use more mana. You will actually see me burn through mana a little faster than you would in Conquest as a result of this. I'm still going to put down 2 plants, right? Specifically for mana reasons. A popular strategy in Slash is for either the mage or the hunter to solo farm one of the lanes, so it's nice to have a plant under each of the towers just in case. Finally, the one thing I want to note before the action gets intense is I did upgrade my teleport because I really wanted to be able to initiate when needed. We don't have a really great other initiator. King Arthur can do an okay job, but he hasn't got a ton of really great crowd control. He's got a cripple, which is okay. I would also like to point out this very risky move they do where On Her initiates, not to Sylvanus, and this is something that you're going to see quite often is Sylvanus, the enemy Sylvanus, not initiating, which is fine. Sylvanus is not typically an initiating Guardian, so that's actually fairly standard. The interesting thing is the On Her is the one who initiates, and he's not building any defense. This is something I check pretty soon. But he's not building any protections, and he's going to do it again pretty much right here, pretty soon afterwards. I'm going to be going forward a little bit to get some poke and get my seeds there, and he's going to, again, try to initiate on me. Now, the On Her initiating by itself is risky, but not necessarily a bad thing. The problem here is that he keeps trying to initiate on me. I am a Guardian. My baseline protections, my baseline max health are going to be higher than average. If he'd pulled that stunt on somebody significantly squishier, he would have had a much better time. He only chose me because I don't have an escape, right? That's the only real reason why he targets me for this. But again, because I'm tankier, this isn't really that much of a problem. He hasn't built Executioner or Chin Size. He's not really going to hurt me that hard, even with his passive reducing my protections by 20. Right, my physical protections. So I was going to come over here and call a... actually, I should turn this up slightly. You know, I was going to try to get a gank, but that didn't wind up happening. Right? At this particular point, I am just looking for enemy actions, specifically because I know they're going to be very aggressive, right? I mentioned earlier they have that higher than average damage. They're going to want to be aggressive. You can actually see the Fenrir being a little too aggressive. You can actually see this. Let's go back slightly here. Right, you can actually see, if you pay attention to the new map, here's Fenrir, right? You can see Fenrir right here. He jumps in, right? Sylvanus does not move forward, which I think the Sylvanus was expected to move forward. Fenrir dies. I'm not sure what the Sylvanus was doing there. That is a really interesting question. He was in pretty good health. He had all his mana, or nearly so. I'm not sure why Sylvanus didn't go in to at least try to help him, but the Fenrir clearly dove with the intention of being helped, well, not the intention, the expectation of being aided by the Sylvanus, and that just didn't happen. Right? Meanwhile, I'm still farting around trying to find a pick. At this point, we are slightly ahead, which is good. We got the first blood, which is going to be very important. But, you know, I'd like to secure a little bit more of a lead to make sure that they can't turn it around and snowball, right? So, this is actually, I want to really quickly point this out, a very interesting choice by the Sylvanus, right? I'm right here, I'm healing, they're on Ixchel, and the Sylvanus, the enemy Sylvanus, this is worth pausing about. Sylvanus is coming in from the middle. He's trying to enter into the middle of my team. Now, clearly he's going to ult, be aware of that. That is his plan here. He is specifically going into ult. However, his team is backing up. He's very heavily banking on Thanatos and on her being able to deal the damage that he needs. Alright, so watch how he reacts here. Now, this is very clearly telegraphed. He uses no abilities until he ults. Thanatos goes up in the air, uses his ult, and then he doesn't follow up, right? We go after Thanatos. Thanatos dives really damn deep for this. Finally, Sylvanus shows up. He gets blasted, right? Now, that's not the Thanatos' problem. Thanatos is never going to keep up with Thanatos, really obviously, right? Sylvanus just can't do that. He's not fast enough. But I pull him in, right? Boom. Get him killed. I didn't intend to kill him there, but, you know, at least he died. And I get out, and the Kukulkan grabs the on her, which is great, and I need to go back because, lo and behold, I'm getting fairly low on health and mana, so I need to go back. I've got to kill, so I have a little bit of room to maneuver, so to speak. But they are also a 3 physical comp. Thanatos on her Fenrir. I grab Sovereignty. I grab some wards. We do have a good lead. Again, I want to maintain that lead. It's going to be pretty important to not let the enemy team turn this around and snowball, because with their team composition, with its high aggression, its high damage potential, even if 1 or 2 of them build support or some defense, they have a lot of ability to deal damage, and it's just not something that I particularly want to have happen on my watch, right? So I want to try to keep this together. Now, we really do a lot of damage here to the Sylvanus, but he backs up, right? King Arthur is in some danger, so I'm trying to keep an eye on this. Notice I'm not really going too aggressive here. I'm hanging with my team. I'm just trying to keep them healthy and alive with their protections up, with my healing, get some roots to increase their damage dealt. I'm really playing this one safely. We have a lead. I don't need to initiate. There's no urgent need. If I see an opportunity, obviously I should take it, but there's no supreme need for aggression. We can play this a little safer, right? Now we finally go on to the Juggernaut. I see the Thanatos. She's clearly prepping to use the Scythe. I body blocked that even though I didn't need to because Kukulkan's ult did the trick, but I couldn't guarantee that at the time, so I whiff everything on Thanatos. Now, at this particular point, I'm seeing all 4 of them here, so I know that Ullr isn't in danger right now, but one of them just backed, right? So I want to try to prep something here, so we do some damage to Sylvanus. Bastet takes care of that little issue, which is great. Now, I'm trying to intimidate Thanatos. That's all I'm trying to do here, so I move up. Thanatos is not intimidated. This is an abysmal failure of an intimidation attempt, so I ult, hoping that'll intimidate her, but I missed, so she's clearly not intimidated, so I back up. And even though we do wind up taking the tower and killing the Thanatos, that was only because the Thanatos was not intimidated at all. And, I mean, I was able to pull the Thanatos and turn it around, but my original goal of scaring them away from the tower failed utterly, right? They just did not care. Which is why that tactic is something you have to be very careful with, because I took a lot of unnecessary damage trying to pull that stunt, right? So you do have to be careful. I did spend too long under the tower. I didn't die for it, but I very easily could have. If I hadn't been able to grab the Thanatos and get them killed, with the help of my allies, obviously, I might have died there, right? I would have probably pretty soon been in insta-kill range for Thanatos' ult, and I might have died. So I did take an unnecessary risk there that only worked out because Kukulkan was really paying attention. The Kukulkan, by the way, as you've probably noticed, is really fantastic, particularly. Just random shout out to the Kukulkan being really great throughout this match. So, I'm kind of wondering if I should aggress or not. We're pretty much loosely surrounded, but Ixchel is separate here. Ixchel does not have an escape. I see that you can actually see the King Arthur. See, I'm confused. I'm wondering what we're gonna do, and then I see King Arthur moving in towards the Ixchel. Here's the Ixchel. You can see King Arthur prepping, so I go for this. I wasn't expecting his ult, but I took it. You know, I capitalized on it. Right? He laid that out. I bust out my healing. She dies to that somehow. Okay, another kill. I have more leeway to die with if I need to. On her dives, I body block for the Kukulkan. I'm trying to get something done, right? I ult people. Great beads by the... I think that was the King Arthur there. Kukulkan picks up Thanatos in the background somehow. I didn't even notice, which is a failure on my part. And I blink way too late to get that... I believe that was Fenrir. So now I'm once again in a dangerous position. But I decide, you know what, I'll grab the Sylvanus while I'm here, tank this for a little while longer, but I clearly tank too long. And you can see where I recognize that I'm in here too long. You can actually see the moment where I'm like, whoops, I've miscalculated. Right here. Yup, too late. Completely my fault. That has nothing to do with anyone else. I stayed way too long under that tower. Didn't need to die there. Right? But on the plus side, I'm still the only one on my team who's died, which means I'm still functionally doing my job, keeping the allies alive. Now, this is a really, really important thing here, actually. This check here, this item check, hold on 1 second. Now, I'd checked earlier and I'd noticed Sylvanus had a cloak. I was expecting him to build Prophetic Cloak in that earlier check. He did. Here it is. This is a bit of a problem here. Alright. Now, there's a couple of things going on here that are really, really worth talking about. First off, as I've already mentioned in previous Sylvanus episodes, because Sylvanus is more of a counter-initiator than he is an initiator, he has already a hard time building stacks for Prophetic Cloak because he's not typically in range to easily poke people and get a stack, right? Unlike, say, Sobek, who gets a stack every time he initiates successfully because he's damaging enemies and flinging them back behind him. Atlas very easily builds stacks on this, right? Terra, if she's going with a more aggressive build. Athena. The list goes on. Sylvanus is not one of these. He's very counter-initiative. He's very stick with the team. He has a harder time building this, right? We've discussed this before. But it's especially hard to build this in Slash, which tends to run faster than Conquest does, right? So not only is he building Prophetic Cloak on Sylvanus, which is more difficult to stack on Sylvanus, but on top of that, he is also building it in Slash. We're basically gambling that this is going to be one of those Slash games that last forever, which they do happen, do not misunderstand me. There are some really long Slash games. There are some Slash games that are longer than some Conquests, obviously. But more often than not, a Slash game is shorter than a Conquest, and you're not usually going to see a Sylvanus of any skill level full stack a Prophetic Cloak by the time the match ends. Even if they hadn't surrendered, right, they still probably would not have been able to build this, fully stack this by the time we won, because we have a really significant lead here. We have 7 kills in 7 minutes. They have 1 kill, and it's only me, right? We have a really substantial advantage at this point in time, and we have the ability to snowball at this point. You could even argue relatively well that we are already beginning to snowball at this point, right? This isn't a great item to build here, okay? In Conquest, maybe it can work. I still personally feel it's too slow to build on Sylvanus, too slow to stack on Sylvanus, so I don't personally build this, and I don't recommend Prophetic Cloak to Sylvanus players. But it's especially rough in Arena, Joust, etc., where your ability to stack this is not necessarily going to outpace the actual rate of the game, right? Besides this, I do confirm that the Fenrir is, in fact, actually building hybrid here. He is functionally playing this as a warrior. I'm not surprised. It was what I was expecting, but it still doesn't mean he can't hit harder than the average warrior with his Brutalize. So I'm still going to want to keep my protections higher and try to protect my allies more often than not, right? That's really my goal here. But right now, I'm very concerned because Kukul Khan and Bastet, both of whom are very squishy, are really pushing up, and I have no visibility. There's no indication of where the enemy team is. There's none of that, right? So I'm really fucking nervous, right? So I do a quick check on right lane. Here's on her coming in from behind, which I saw in my peripheral vision. You know, I'm coming in, and I just want to make sure that Sylvanus is okay, that Bastet is okay. Thanatos gets ambushed by Uller, which is not a sentence you hear very often, and has to ult out, which still makes me pretty nervous because Thanatos could turn that around. I somehow get the kill on her, as you do, and I spend way too long under tower. See, I make a really serious mistake here, okay? I don't need to die here at all. I just kill the on her, and then I stay under tower for 20 more minutes. Well, okay, obviously an exaggeration, but I stay under tower significantly longer than I need to. Yes, they pick up the Sylvanus. Yes, the Fenrir dies to me somehow. That doesn't matter. I didn't need to be under tower for that long. I should have left the moment on her died. I didn't need to be there. It would have been better for me to pull out of the tower. I have no idea what I was thinking at the time. I think I was actually being distracted by something. That's not an excuse. I still, even with the distraction, I still should have recognized the fairly obvious signal of, hey, you're under tower for no reason, right? Bastet apologizes for missing an ult, so I reassure her. I'm not sure why she's so upset about the ult. I mean, yeah, it's her ult, but in the long run, it's fine, you know? But yeah, I was under that tower far too long. I had no business being there, and Fenrir absolutely did a great job capitalizing on my massive error. Now, King Arthur and I make a pretty significant goof at this particular point in time, right? I want to go get the Juggernaut because I've got Bastet here, but Bastet leaves just as I'm, roughly about the time when I'm throwing my auto attack. I don't know why we started this, and I'm not blaming the King Arthur. The King Arthur was following my lead. This was my call, and it was the wrong call. Okay, let's be really brutally honest here. This was a wrong call on my part. They steal it because obviously it's just King Arthur and I. I should have backed out of there and let that heal up. That was my mistake there. But I get to pull out the Sylvanus. Now, I'm only really comfortable pulling out the Sylvanus at this point because I know for a fact he's building Prophetic Cloak. He's not going to have the protections that I'm going to have. Fenrir dies to me again somehow. I'm pretty sure my heal is just lasting 1 second longer than the tornado, or it's ticking between the tornado ticks or something like that. I'm not really sure. I ult. There goes Ixchel for whatever reason. And Anher's back here causing trouble, trying to kill Bastet. So I'm just looking to get Anher killed and for Bastet to not die. Success. The Kukulkan cleans that one up. And then we just have to whack this Juggernaut, but they surrender, I think, right about here. Yeah. Now, I want to be very clear. Both the enemy Sylvanus and I only made really specifically two major mistakes. The enemy Sylvanus' first mistake was going around into the middle of our team that early in the game where I paused it and I talked about that. The second mistake was building Prophetic Cloak. Those are the only two real mistakes that Sylvanus made. There was a minor quibble there when the Fenrir went in early on. I talked about that. But that was simply, I suspect, a breakdown in communications. For me, starting that Juggernaut and staying so long under the tower and left, well, actually, you could even argue the first tower death was also a pretty significant mistake. That was a miscalculation, so I consider that more of a minor mistake. I didn't want to die to the tower. I didn't choose to stand there, well, kind of I chose. I miscalculated. I thought I had a little bit more time than I did, but that death to the tower and left lane, absolutely unnecessary. This is a wild success from a support standpoint, though, because I am the only one who died. Okay, this means that one of my goals, which is to keep my allies alive, absolutely succeeded. Now, obviously, the enemy team surrendered, which makes this not quite a perfect match in that regard, but all things given, the fact that I was the only one who died means that I did my job, which is absolutely fantastic, right? Now, let's talk really quickly about builds. You'll notice 3 people built stacks here. Ullr, Bastet, and Anher. Anytime you build stacks in Slash that isn't Gauntlet of Thebes or Soul Eater, because they build off of assists, which are significantly easier to get, you are taking a really interesting gamble, right, with that stack building. You are basically gambling that you can build these stacks before the game ends. Now, this was a surrender, so or let me rephrase that, you can build these stacks in time for them to matter, would be, I think, a better description of that. Now, for Anher and Ullr, they're hunters, they've got a pretty decent shot at building these, particularly Ullr, who's got a lot of options for clearing waves. It's pretty safe to build stacks on Ullr. You're not often going to be on the wrong foot by building Transcendence on Ullr, as this Ullr has done. The Bastet building Transcendence, though, is significantly riskier because she actually has to be pretty damn close to minions to be able to clear them instead of the mage or the hunter and get her stacks. She was succeeding at it, do not misunderstand me. The Bastet was playing a very beautiful game. Alright, she was playing Bastet absolutely fantastically. and she was absolutely building those stacks. She was doing a great job building her stacks, but I want you to understand that she was pulling that off with aplomb because, one, she's probably been Bastet a hell of a lot. Two, she accepted the risk, estimated what was going on here, and absolutely pulled it off, right? But I want you to understand it is a risk, especially if you don't have range. For Kukulkan, again, there is stacks, but Kukulkan's a really interesting exception because unlike everyone else who builds Book of Thoth, Kukulkan's passive gives him bonus power equal to his max mana, and Thoth increases his maximum mana. So while normally it would be a gamble to build stacks with a mage, specifically Book of Thoth, for Kukulkan, because he gets basically double effects out of the Book of Thoth, he gets a higher return. He gets more out of it, so it's always going to be worth building Book of Thoth on Kukulkan, except possibly in Joust or Arena. But in Slash, absolutely. Build Book of Thoth, because even though it is a bit risky, it's going to pay off so much more in the late game that even if it takes you a little longer because you're competing with your allies for these stacks, something that isn't necessarily true in Conquest, you're still going to be in a really strong position, because Kukulkan can do with half the stacks what most people can do with the nearly full stacked Book of Thoth. Obviously, when you get the full stacks, you get a bonus, whatever, right? That's a totally different conversation. But at the end of the day, yeah, here we have Kukulkan building Book of Thoth, which is less of a risk for him, not because it's less risky, but because the dividends, the payout is higher, right? Same risk, better rewards. King Arthur also has Prophetic Cloak, but again, King Arthur has a lot of options to inflict damage. I was earlier talking about how King Arthur doesn't really have much crowd control that can help lock down an enemy, but he absolutely has the damage dealing that he needs to be able to build Prophetic Cloak absurdly quickly. He's got his Spin to Win, he's got the Shock Wave, he's got the Stomp, he's got all kinds of ways in which he can ensure he's getting this stack basically off cooldowns, right? Which is why it's so effective on King Arthur. Even in Slash, where even some more idealized Guardians have a hard time building this in time for it to be important, King Arthur, because of his extensive array of abilities, does not really have that much of a problem building Prophetic Cloaks stacks and getting that online in time for it to matter in the mid-game. Right? So, outside of that, there's really not a whole lot of other things to talk about really extensively here. Right? I've already talked about the Sylvanus' build. Other than the issue of the Prophetic Cloak, his build is totally fine. I will say it's pretty interesting that the Fenrir grabbed both Tainted Steel and Contagion. I think that was a little bit overboard, given that he had Tainted Steel, which has, I think, 50% anti-heal right off the top on either your abilities or your auto attacks, I believe. He really didn't need Contagion. Contagion would have been better off being, say, Gladiator's Shield or Berserker's Shield or whatever he wanted to use in order to better both build protections and, get some damage in there. I think Contagion on top of Tainted Steel was a little bit too much. If he really wanted to double down on the anti-healing, I think Brawler's Beatstick would have been better because it provides stronger anti-healing, right? But I can see why he built this, just with the combination of Contagion with Tainted Steel. It's just a little overboard, right, in terms of anti-healing, especially since they've nerfed healing relatively recently, where a lot of it is just a flat heal, it doesn't scale off of power. There really wasn't a huge need for Contagion, right? Outside of that, pretty standard stuff. But yeah, I just wanted to use this as a kind of example of why it's not as important to build Prophetic Cloak. Why you might want earrings on Sylvanus in Slash where you might not want them in Conquest, right? It's more of a timing thing. Things like that. There will be a full-length Slash Sylvanus episode soon, but I wanted to put this out there as sort of both a sort of prequel and also to talk about the enemy Sylvanus as well, because he can demonstrate things that I wouldn't be able to demonstrate as well. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. If you liked this, please like and subscribe. If you didn't, please ignore me. And if you have any comments, questions, concerns, ideas, suggestions, or requests, please leave them down in the comment section below. And thank you all very much for joining me, and have a great 24 hours.